Joseph Baba Ifa family, what's going on? Coming at you with a new video on Eshu Aje. And if you haven't had the chance, please be sure to subscribe. New videos coming out all the time on these Eshus, and want to put out some new information so that we're not reading the same old thing that's online, right? New stuff. So Eshu Aje. When we look at the word Aje, in Cuba they say Eshu Aje, right? But the Cuban headgar, the vernacular, it's very quick. So the J kind of got lost in context and it became Ye, right? So a lot of people say Eshu Aje, the Eshu of the world, right? Because the word Aje means world. But when we look at how this Eshu is confectioned, and then what the name means when we say it more in a traditional aspect, Eshu Aje means the Eshu of the shell, right? And that's why this Eshu is mounted in a conch shell, right? So to really understand how this occurred, we have to go to the Odu Obeade, or Obeirede, which is within the Afro-Cuban practice, the Odu that was identified where Eshu came down from heaven, or his Isaraye, as it's known. So in Obeade was where Orumila lived by the riverbank. And he had a wife, and his wife's name was Oshun. And Orumila was a Babalawo, and he would travel a lot, and he was constantly, going out and doing Ifa work. He would leave his home for extended periods of time, and Oshun would be home. Ironically, Obeade speaks of the position of the Apetebi, or the wife of the Babalawo, or initiate of Orumila, as a woman who would attend the house on Orumila, even in his absence. So Orumila would go, and Oshun would stay at home. But there was a gentleman who lived on the riverbank, and his name was Eshu. And, she would look at him every day. But the ironic thing about Eshu is that Eshu was always in the nude. And when we talk about Eshu, Eshu is really known for his phallic power. And not to become too indiscreet, in the video, he was always kind of fondling himself in the river. And, Oshun would kind of look at him and be like, oh, wow, that's interesting, And it got to the point where Eshu would notice her staring at him, and Eshu would be like, hey, are you going to come talk to me? And she's like, I usually don't speak to nude men by the river. And, he was like, well, I don't bite, you could talk to me, And they were talking, and she was like, well, what's your name? And he said, my name is Eshu, right? In some versions, he actually said his name was Eshu Aje. And there's other versions where Oshun was actually Aje. And the reason I'm saying that is because it speaks of the combination of both. And this is what happens. So once they introduced themselves to each other, things kind of took their course, and they ended up being intimate, right? And obviously this was, an affair. And the position that they were in intimately actually is pretty reminiscent of the way Eshu looks now. And I'll explain that at the end, right? So Orumila, when he got home, he started realizing like the energy wasn't right. He kind of looked at Eshu. He's like, I got this guy by my house. I have to deal with him because we work, but I could do without him. And he performed divination, where Ifa said that he had to perform sacrifice to be able to, find out what was going on at his home, or this energy that he was feeling. So he left, and he performed the sacrifice at the other end of the river, or, wherever he went. But when he finished the Ebo, Ifa had instructed him to come right home, quicker than scheduled. And when he got there, he saw, Oshun had, an Eshu, and Oshun was mounted on him, right, in an intimate position. And, they were caught. And Orumila was like, oh my God, you're being unfaithful to me. And, Oshun was trying to say, no, it's not what you think. And Eshu really didn't say anything. He's like, there's no point in denying it. So what ended up happening was Orumila basically looked at Oshun and he said, you can stay with Elegua. If that's who you prefer and that's who you're happier with, I'm not mad at you, Because the thing was, Orumila worked with Elegua heavily, because Elegua was the one who would take his ebos to heaven. So he couldn't fight with Elegua or get into a conflict with Elegua, even though he was, carrying on an affair with his wife. And that was where the combination of Eshu and Oshun, or Eshu and Aje, occurred. And it's due to this position, or the mounted position that Oshun had on top of Eshu. That's why you see sometimes the Eshu Aje, it's not a standalone shell. Sometimes they actually mount them in a plate. So the shell represents Oshun or Aje, depending on how you want to define her at that moment. And what goes inside or in the plate kind of represents Eshu in that combination, where Eshu and Aje, or Eshu and the spirituality of Oshun, became one. And that's where that comes from. So when we talk about this Eshu, has a lot to do with protecting the home, not allowing, interruptions in home life or people to come and destroy it. Eshu would protect the house. This Eshu protects the home very strongly. Has a lot to do with Oshun, obviously. Orumila, the Orisha Aje as well. The river, the ebos. Ifa says that the ebos that are rested upon Eshu Aje will be very efficient as long as the person always maintains them happy. And it's not to say it's better than the other Eshus for this, but it's one of his specialties. This is what he does. Ifa says that the person who has this Eshu may travel to make a living, may stay at home to protect the household, any of these different manifestations, right? And that's Eshu Aje, right? Has a lot to do with money as well. Because when we talk about the shell as a symbol, the shell is money. It's prosperity. It was one of the modes of currency that was used in Yoruba culture, and Eshu has to do with all of this. The person who has Eshu Aje, should be prosperous if they're aligned, right? And that was in the Odu of Obeate. So that's the information. That's actually, some people would go as far to say that's where Eshu Aje first manifested. And Eshu Aje is one of the oldest manifestations of Eshu, because if that's where Eshu actually came down, or if we're talking about the shell in general, it goes back in Ifa mythology as far as the beginning, right? So it speaks of that. Now, Eshu Aje should not be mistaken with Eshu Alaje, right? Alaje means the owner of the shell, or he who is covered in shells. And it's an African Eshu that is made out of wood. And he actually has shells hanging from his neck, and he's covered in them, kind of representing his wealth and the prosperity he can bring to people. And this is another Eshu that can be consecrated, and I believe I touched on it in the video about the different types of Eshus. This is a completely different Eshu. Now, obviously, do they have some similarities and to do with each other? Of course. They both have to do with the Orisha Aje, being that they utilize her currency. And, these two Eshus are strongly linked to the Orisha Aje because they're somewhat of the administrators of her wealth, or the ones that interact with her and protect her. And we're going to speak about that relationship when I come out with that video on Aje Shaluga or Orisha Aje, however you want to refer to her, or just Aje. But not to be mistaken, two completely different Eshus. They're working towards the same goal. Pretty much everyone can have Eshu Alaje. Not everyone can have Eshu Aje. We have to make sure it's compatible with you, or at least it's in your sign. So that's basically the information we have on Eshu Aje, right? A couple of my god kids have it. Definitely want to come out with this video so they can understand the concept a little bit more. For all the people that are actually interested in receiving Eshu Aje, you're more than welcome to reach out to us so we can talk about how that works. Has a lot to do with prosperity and business, just like Eshu Aje does. Just different methods to achieve the same goal. Just making sure that either of them is compatible for you before we move forward. So guys, Eshu Aje video. We got some good information here. We know, where he came down, what was the reason for his birthing, how did he come about, how did he manifest. Very popular Eshu. You see a lot of them. Now, mind you, not every Eshu that you see in a shell is Eshu Aje. There's other ones like Obasin Laye is one of them. Gosh, there's a couple different ones that are mounted in shells, even though they're not Eshu Aje. So even though they're technically Eshu Aje because they're in the shell, that's not who they are. They're, Eshu Aje may have had kids. He may have had, there may have been other ones that, utilize the shell for different reasons. But most of the time it's Eshu Aje. But it doesn't necessarily mean 100% of the time it's going to be, right? So guys, I really hope you enjoyed the video and we learned something and took something from it. This Eshu series, we're really happy we're getting it out. A lot of people have been asking a bunch of different questions about all these Eshu paths. Thank you so much for your patience. We're getting bombarded in all the best ways, and we're getting out this information as quickly as we can, right? So hope everybody's having a happy holiday season. Be careful driving out there. Be around your loved ones. Show compassion, show humanity in these times that we're going through. And guys, nothing but love for you. Wishing you the best. Thank you so much for all the support. You've been wonderful. And don't forget to take care of your issues, right? So guys, Ache, and good evening to you from Joseph Baba Ifa and Botánica Candles and more. Bless you.